If you're working on projects that make use of multiple materials or blended or mixed materials, you may encounter a situation where those materials need to be combined into a single image. So for example, we've got this project that's been UV mapped in a particular way due to the image that we are using, and it's set up to use blended materials so that different areas of our texture map is mapped to our object, and the two or three are blended together. So in shading workspace, in our material, this is what we end up with. So we're using a mixed or blended material here. So we've got our images or image reference points. We've got our separate UV maps that are controlling where and how the images are mapped, which are then all combined, joined to principled BSDF, which gives us what we see in the 3D view. Now, if we're going to be exporting this project or using it outside Blender, this won't work because this setup is particular to Blender. So the way that we address this is to bake a single image map from all these materials. So we've got different blend materials for the different elements of the mesh that have to be combined into a single image. So let's just go into material properties. Let's just rename these. So that's the vent. That's the helmet. And that's the visor. So each one of these is a different setup, but using blended materials or blended textures. So the way that we fix this is, first we need to drop in, add texture, image texture, drop in as image texture node, and to this we want to add input UV map. So drop that in and link that up UV to vector. Next, create a new image map. So let's call this helmet all. Change the size as needed. So let's go with 2048. And let's give it a generated type, and all we need here is just a UV grid. So this is just a temporary image, and this is going to be our canvas that we are going to bake everything to. Now that we've got these nodes, we need to copy them. So select, shift select, or shift click, node, copy. We're just going to paste those into each material instance. So we set it up on the vent. We're just going to select the helmet node, paste, drop those into place, select the visor, node, paste. So we've now got 3 users. Next step, object data properties, UV maps, just add another map. So click on the plus. We can leave that as is, UV map. They'll all reference, we need to duplicate or replicate this to all the objects, and they will all use UV map. Same again, add, same again, add. So in our materials, we now want to add that UV map as our point of reference. So click on the list, and there is UV map. So do that for all of them. Then next, whilst UV map is highlighted, so this is important, this next step, select our objects, want to UV unwrap these to create a new mapping that's associated with UVMap. So with it highlighted, make sure everything is selected, and let's just do a unwrap angle based. So that's what we've got. So we're not necessarily going to see this on our object, but this mapping is associated with this image and this UV map. So just to repeat that, so we've dropped in per material a new image texture and UV map reference for each material. We've created a new UV map in UV maps, so that's object data properties. And then we've generated a new UV layout that's associated with the UV map. So once we've got all of that, render properties, switch to cycles because we can't bake in Eevee. Bake properties, expand, and for this we're doing diffuse, so bake type, combined, diffuse. We only want color in this particular instance, so deselect direct and indirect, those are the lighting properties. And then before we bake, object mode, what we can do is duplicate these objects. Just gives us a reference, duplicate objects, move that to one side, join our source objects together. So now we have one object. It's going to be referencing the default materials and default image. But what we can do here is set or select, browse to, helmet all. There is our image. Exit edit mode into object mode, and then just go back into our materials just for a final check. So we've now got material properties, all our materials linked together, and they all reference our new nodes. So go through the materials, make sure the same image texture is selected. So that's the active object, that is our canvas. So double check. Let's go back into UV editing. Object mode. Select our object, and then just click on the bake button. This may take some time depending on how complex or how large the image is that's being rendered. And that is our baked map. So we can check this, go back into shading, and all we need to do here is disconnect the original materials. So we've disconnected those from principled BSDF, and then all we need to do is reconnect or connect our image, and it should appear correctly on our object. Do that for all the materials. And there is our object using a single image. That now means our project can be exported. So just to mention here, the reason we join our objects together, if we separate them or if we leave them separated, what can happen is that the margin property can overbake and we end up with some bleed between our UV islands. So we can leave, this is why we duplicate the object. So we can duplicate the object if we need to export the project as multiple meshes. Because we duplicated the original, it is carrying exactly the same properties material wise and UV map wise as the working mesh, the one that we baked, without necessarily needing us to do any more work to the active object. But that is how we can bake multiple images down into a single image. And then of course all we need to do is save this now that we've got it. File, save as, helmet all, set your format of choice, save the image, and that is now locked in via the material as a bitmap that will be included with the export.